everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Spilling the Tea on GovCon. I'm Teresa Moon, Director of Business Development for Parabolis. We provide a better financial partnership for government contractors that includes a line of credit to fund your growth. The purpose of this podcast is to assist small businesses with success in the federal marketplace by introducing them to industry experts and resources that they may not otherwise know about. Today's guest is my new friend, Dr. Dolores Kuchina-Musina, CEO of REXOTA Solutions. She and I frequent the same circles and finally got the chance to meet recently. And I absolutely hopped on the opportunity to have her on the show to share her amazing insights and expertise. So thank you, Dolores, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So this is going to be fun because like we chatted about when we were prepping for the show, this is a new subject for our audience. So I'm excited to jump in. But before we do that, just in case some in our listenership may not know who you are or about your work, I know you've put a lot of time and effort into it. Can you share some information about your background in government contracting and the services that your business, offers to our community?
Sure, absolutely. So a little bit about me. I am a huge contracts nerd. So contracts for me is something that I absolutely love doing. I have over a decade experience of doing government contracts. I started out originally doing commercial contracts. So I come from a little bit of a bit different background. I am one of those crazy people that sought this job out. I really wanted to do it. I was really inspired by the mission, but also the challenge of understanding a whole different type of language. I've had experience doing state local contracts. I've had experience doing international contracts, and actually recently made a goal for myself to get involved or be part of negotiations for every single type of contract that is out there in various industries. So huge contract nerd, so much so that I spent 6 years of my life dedicated to PhD work. I wrote my dissertation on other transaction authorities, specifically focused on the DoD prototyping authority and trying to measure its effectiveness per the request of Congress and the congressional research reports, and trying to figure out, is there a better way to measure how we look at other transaction authorities other than how many, how much, and focusing on the factors that matter in order for us to show progress in innovation, progress in technological advances, and also in our ability to move technology across through government funding.
I swear, if I wasn't impressed already, you've just completely blown my mind. So excuse my brains all over the wall there, because that is amazing. You really have done your homework, literally and figuratively. And we're going to share the information from your dissertation here too, so people can check it out. But I am so impressed with people who really have a passion and go for it. And I think that is evident in your ability to hone in what you love about contracts and see how you can take what you've learned in your studies and apply that to making a difference. Because we know, being a part of this industry, as exciting as it is, it doesn't change very quickly or very often. And so having innovators like you that are behind the scenes learning and growing and finding new ways for us to interact with the federal government is really exciting, because we have to change. And, to be cliche or to, quote Bob Dylan, if you ain't changing, you ain't growing, right? So you gotta make sure that we're focused on what it is that we can do to make an impact, so that the change can be made and that small businesses can actually have a better chance to having more opportunities in the federal marketplace. So kudos to you and thank you, because I know a whole community of people that are listening right now are going to benefit from the studying and the practice that you're putting into place based off of what you've learned. So with that being said, we've got some really great questions here that are going to dive into some of what your expertise is and let you expound on that. And then we'll make sure to give people the information about your dissertation as well, so they can check it out. They might need someone to help them with it if they're anything this one, but I'll try my best to read it and pretend like I know what you're talking about. I'll ask questions though.
Perfect.
So great. So let's talk about some of the things that really get you excited, and one of which is contracts in general. So what is it about contracts that gets you excited?
I love the fact that you can take language and you can wrap it around in a way that meets the intent of what you're trying to achieve. one of the things that I'm sure, people in the contracts community and a lot of people in the legal industry have probably heard a lot. It's a contract, it's a contract, it's a contract. What you have in your contract is in black and white, and it's pretty firm in terms of what you're supposed to execute. What I really like to appreciate about contract is, although you have all of those terms and conditions outlined, that doesn't mean that there's no creativity around it. And I think we forget that a little bit sometimes, right? We think about contracts as this like document that like is overbearing, that legal holds us up and like closing the deal. And it's too much. Why can't we just sign and not have to read it? And the appreciation of what contracts people do and what legal does when we're constructing these contracts is that we're able to listen for how someone is expressing a need, a desire, even like, oh, I want to make sure that we're protected against this. And we can write language to that in a way that's meaningful, protects both parties. You can write it so that it is applicable to the entire statement of work. You can write it if it's applicable to the scenario. And you can make the contract as complicated as you want it to be or as simple as you want it to be. And additionally, language is a beautiful thing. Words have a lot of intent in them. So being very careful and very purposeful with your language is so important. And I really fell in love with the creativity of it. And I feel like sometimes that goes unappreciated, especially, when you read articles about the FAR and what it says. And we all make the jokes, like if you want a good nap, just read the FAR, just open it up, it automatically just comes to you. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of really good stuff in there. And there, the language that gets selected, that gets printed, that is so key. And the contract is how you know the deal is closed. And I think that that's another thing that also goes a little bit unappreciated about it, but it's such a big highlight. The deal isn't closed until you ink that document with both parties, or if it's a unilateral, it's, one signature. But that's how you can start billing. That's how you can start executing. That really seals all of those conversations that your programs, your BD people or business development people have worked so hard to do. It closes that deal. So now your company can be profitable, it can operate, and you have something that also you can fall back on and say, oh, wait, what were we supposed to be doing? Did we meet those objectives? Did we meet those deliverables? And if you have a good contract, that's something that you can lean on. And it kind of becomes your guardian in a way when you're performing the work.
I swear you just made that very poetic at best. You started it by referencing Hemingway. And I'm an English major, so I followed you all the way through that. But I love what you say about the FAR being incorporated in it too. My CEO always jokes in his presentations and says the FAR is measured in weight and not length. And so I think that anyone that's dealing with it can relate to that. But the fact that you see it as exciting in the sense of the way that it can be crafted from the side of presentation of the contract, I think is important, because if people thought about it that way, they might not be as intimidated by it. So whether it's written, in a way that isn't as easy to understand or write down to its most simplistic form, it was there for a purpose like that. And I think part of understanding that, or having someone like you working with companies to understand it like that, really allows you to benefit from giving the information in the way that it was intended to be received then as well in return. So to your point, at the end, the contract is, the next step, it's solidified, is the award. Being able to have someone walk you through that so you can give the information in the right way can help you achieve that end goal and that result as well. So, which is what everyone that's listening, if they're in GovCon, anyone that's listening understands that that's the ultimate goal. So I love that. And I think that that's a very positive and fluid way of thinking about it. And I love it. So I hope that encourages people to jump on your positive train. And if they need help with it, they know that they're going to get some really solid, positive, and not skeptical support from you and your work. That's amazing. So let's move on a little bit and talk about your, special passion and expertise. Why is there a focus for you on other transaction authorities, or which is also referred to as OTAs in the business?
Yeah, great question. So when I was doing my dissertation, like research, essentially like trying to figure out what am I going to write about, I wanted to, one, write about something that combined my passion for science. I come from a physics household. My mom has 2 PhDs in physics. My grandma is a physicist. So science has always been at the forefront for me. And seeing that, investment in science, investment in technological advances was not as is not as prevalent today as it was like in the 50s and 60s. You hear a lot of people talking about how it was the golden years for innovation. Mm-hmm. And so I started looking for how does public procurement or acquisition support innovation? And everything I kept reading was FAR based, right? And I'm like, okay, I get it. And I had a unique situation at work where I realized that there was a gap also from the government and industry side of how like some of this new technology is working. So I was like, there has to be a better way. Like it can't just be the FAR. Like there has to be something else out there. It can't, like the government has to be able to operate in some other flexible way that allows for them to do business with industry and help promote them. Started researching GAO reports, and again, there was like, how do we get these companies that don't want to do business with the government to do business with the government? And in there it was written through other transaction authorities. So I was like, cool, keep going, like highlight it, research it later. I go to a conference, and in that conference, I sit down and someone's like, the new way of contracting in the government is through OTAs. And I'm like, oh, I'm in it. I'm sold. Tell me everything. I want to know everything about it. What's this new way? And they start talking about how the FAR doesn't apply. This is more flexible. This allows for more collaboration. So like light bulbs are like going off. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. So I look on the agenda and I'm like, I'm going to go to every single session that's on this topic. So I go to the next session, and the presenters there were like, so OTAs are not new. They've been around since the 1950s. It's not anything new. It's just new today. For people, they're actually starting to utilize it. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I just left a session about how they're brand new and they're like the new sexy way of contracting. And so I started digging into it. And what I absolutely loved about OTAs and how they were written is that this authority was given either through a sentence or like a couple of sentences that you see with some of the authorities that federal agencies have, or they're very prescriptive in terms of this is what we want to use OTs for. So for example, Department of Defense OT authority is very prescriptive in terms of what the statute says, how it's laid out, what the purpose of it is, and how do you actually execute it. And there's guides out there, there's sample language. And I absolutely loved it. It really helped blend the way that I understood contracts from a commercial standpoint, and also saw how it could really break down some barriers on the government side in order for them to become those leaders in innovation that they were before, and help fund that and work with entities that they haven't really necessarily worked with before, and help stimulate the economy. And so as like I started reading economic papers, I started reading public policy papers, all about how how different ways that public procurement can support it, but not a lot of people were writing about OTs. And I realized it was because there was this like mystery about it. And even today, like I'm still talking with people that are like, I have no idea what the statute says. I don't know who can use it. Do you even know if there's a guide out there for me to look at to see what it means? What's the intent? And it was that creativity aspect of it. There wasn't something that it was like how I would describe like plug and play contracts, right? Where you're just selecting what clauses apply, or you throw the FAR at people that we've seen with some of the government contracts where it's overwhelming. The government is actually allowed to have discussions with industry and come up with an agreement that is tailored for the work that they're doing. Like if that doesn't like make you like get up and do a little like dance of excitement, I don't know what will. You're breaking down that barrier of communication between industry and government in order for them to develop something that's mutually beneficial, not only between those two parties, but it's mutually beneficial for the public. And I think that is like really, really wonderful all on its own.
I agree. And I mean, this is the only way that we get technological advances to the forefront of whether it's, Department of Defense or whatever it is that keeps us competitive in the world market, right? I mean, the small businesses that are coming out of incubators at universities today have technologies that have never been seen before. And without OTAs, they would have a total disadvantage or inability to get what they're doing to the people who will actually be able to utilize it to make things better for the warfighter or for Homeland Security across the board. I mean, those are just two things that they can be utilized for. But I think that it's a beautiful thing that your commitment to it starts from the influence at home. I think it's super cool that your mom and your grandma were physics majors. I mean, now I'm really starting to feel neglected in the brains department here. I feel like I'm way out of my league with you. So
No.
I'm glad. But hey, I make a purpose of surrounding myself with people who are way smarter than me. So thank you for contributing to that. It doesn't take much to get there, but I'm glad that I've got you now in my bag of tricks to offer up there. But I think it's amazing that you came to it from that type of perspective. Of not only having that science background and the passion for that, but the fact that you saw that there was such a disconnect from the, race to the moon in the 50s and the 60s to where we are now. Why we're not as passionate about it anymore is because we've put so many hurdles in front of the businesses that really would be able to bring that up. And, our company services the small business market and federal contracting. And so I'm talking to innovators daily that are involved in CIBR and STTR, research and development, and the things that they're doing. Not only can I not connect with because my brain isn't smart enough to follow it, but it's like, how do we get these people in front of the people that can utilize this for the betterment of all of us, right? For the betterment of the public. And so I love it that it's a lot to do with motivating you to learn more about it. And because it's exciting, but what's scary is that if they didn't have people like you advocating for them, they might not ever be able to utilize it outside the commercial market. And we need it in the government equally as much. And so that's awesome. I love that. And putting your expertise into practice the way that you have as an advocate, I think is really amazing. And that's why I was so excited to have you on, because nobody has talked about OTAs with us before, and especially not with such a positive background and positive momentum behind them like you do. So super exciting. And so I'm super grateful. So I'll shut up now and I'll keep moving on. So you are excited about change within the process. And so what are some things that you would want to change when people are talking about OTAs?
So the first thing that I would like to change is I would really like for people to be more accepting of OTAs. And I think it starts a little bit with change management. When we look at what prevents agencies from utilizing their authorities that they have, it really comes down to human nature. We like to live in our comfort bubble. And so when we're looking at OTs, a lot of agencies and contract shops don't have people that have experience to execute OTs. And it's scary to pick up the phone and say, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? And reach out to another agency. We're very good at staying within our comfort levels. And coming from the contracts background, also with the experience that I've had and the training that I've had, I remember the impact I had when someone told me, as a contracts manager, you can go to jail if you have a bad contract. And I was like, ooh, I don't look good in orange. I don't, that's not something like I want to be a part of.
Right.
I want to make sure that every contract that I execute, every contract I'm a part of is something I'm very confident in. And I feel like there's a lot of contract professionals that feel that way. And it comes to having leadership that supports it. And so that brings me to the second thing that I would like to change is that we need to do more incremental change through education and through training and through advisory support from others to break down those silos and have a support system, almost like a community of there's a very small one already, but of OTA fans or creative contracting fans that live in a space of, hey, let me show you how I do it. Let me show you how other agencies have done it, and you can leverage it. because that's ultimately the beauty of OT agreements, is that you are constructing a contract for that specific project, for that specific effort, and for that, time frame that you're looking at managing this work. And so if you don't have something to reference, imagine how intimidating it is, to stare at your Word document with that blinker just like blinking at you, and you're like, great, I'm supposed to write something from scratch for $1.5 million. Cool. What do I reference? And so what do most people reference is they reference the FAR, because that's also our comfort level. And that's I think that brings me to the third thing that I would change. And that's taking people away from the comfort level of the FAR, because it puts a huge risk on the beauty of OTs. The FAR is there for your traditional procurements. It has a purpose, and it has a purpose for things that you're trying to execute that fit within that regulation and within those guidelines. OTs are being put at risk when we start flowing down or including FAR clauses that really shouldn't be there. Even DFAR clauses or defense, the defense supplement to the Federal Acquisition Regulations. Those clauses put at risk the flexibility that we have, the language, the language that we can use because of our comfort level. So being able to challenge ourselves and say, okay, what have I used in the past? I like what this language says in the FAR clause, but I'm not necessarily going to copy and paste it. Let me see what other people have written, and maybe even like expand it and look at like some commercial contract templates and see how are other people writing about it. We do it all the time when we write our LinkedIn posts. We reference other people's work. We do it when we're trying to summarize a book that we've read, or even in podcasts, we reference each other all the time as well when we have these conversations. It's okay to do that in a contract. And there's certain clauses that you will reuse based on your risk assessment. And that's where the legal department becomes like your biggest support system.
Well, they do it all the time in their work, right? That's how they build their case, is by referencing other cases that are similar.
Yes. So if you're a programs person and you're working with contracts to get this OT drafted, bring in that legal team, have them be a part of that conversation. They are there to advise you, to protect you, and they should be someone you should lean on. It's a business decision on how you want to proceed, but they're there to help you and be in your corner. And I think a lot of times we look at lawyers and we're like, oh, I don't want to get them involved. But they would love to get involved, because it makes their job easier at the end of the day. Because if something happens that we don't want to happen, that we're trying to protect ourselves from, they know what your original intent was. There's not a lot of backtracking that happens.
Right.
And it makes your acquisition timeline shorter, because you don't get stopped by anyone that's going, wait a minute, like this isn't right. And you're also helping protect an authority that's supposed to be there to be used flexibly. Like,
right.
You're using it for that. So for me, a lot of the change is like very small, very, what I would say, doesn't take a lot of effort, and kind of helps open up your creativity, your open-mindedness to it, and also allows for you to do the one thing that I think we all do very poorly, which is ask for help. Yep. And that opens up your network. That opens you up to learning from other people and new experiences. So that's what those are the three things that I would say I would change.
I love that so much, because I say a lot when I'm presenting to small business owners about how learning from each other's experience will help mitigate you making the same mistake twice. And just because it wasn't your mistake the first time doesn't mean that you need to make it. So if we are actually interacting with one another and sharing our experiences, there's so much growth that can happen there. And especially from the more tenured businesses sharing, I think they're just building and solidifying a stronger path for those that are coming behind them by being able to do that. And, and engaging with federal agencies is scary, because a lot of times people just don't know what they don't know. And a lot of them aren't aware that they can ask questions up to a specific point. And so it's good that we're sharing that over and over again, that you can talk to your KO up to a certain point and engage and get information. And so I think from both sides of the contract process, it's important to know that dialogue is important. And so language is just as important with clarification as it is with consistency and message. And so I think I'm glad that you highlighted that. I think it's something that we talk about enough that people can see that that's important. So that's awesome. Well, I have loved all of this. And so I know that we've only, it's the tip of the iceberg of what your knowledge base is. And so good news is we'll have plenty to talk about when I twist your arm and make you come back again.
Yes.
Awesome. I always like, though, after, sharing some insight, to give our guests the ability to share some sage wisdom, tips and tricks for our audience. And if you can't think of any of those off the top of your head, your best one-liner is good for me too.
No, I love this. I would say, I love what you said in the beginning about not being, the smartest person in the room. I think that's a very important lesson. And I would even add to that, don't be scared to be the optimist in the room. And the reason why I say that is because innovation is risky. And that's what makes it so wonderful. You're doing something that has never been done before. And whether that's being innovative in a process or creating an innovative product, or maybe you're coming up with a different way to write contract language, for example, be the optimist in the room to say, like, we can do this, we can figure it out, because there's people that are still sitting there silently that are debating whether they're even going to be able to add value. And, if you're willing to be that advocate, being willing to be that support system, you're going to inspire someone, and you're going to be able to really see the change happen around you just from you just making just a small statement like, we're going to get this, we're going to figure it out. I think that stuff like that gets missed a lot because we are in the business as contracts professionals of mitigating risk or managing risk, depending on what your organization's level of risk is. That is what our job is. And when you have someone come in and being very pessimistic, it weighs heavy on what you think that relationship's going to look like. So if you're the person that's like, we're going to get through this one way or another, we're going to figure it out, we're going to get that language right. And if we can't, guess what? We can always write a contract mod. So right. if you can be that person and you can take that little bit of nugget to be, that optimist in the room once in a while, you would be surprised to see how much change you can actually create around you.
I love it. You have been amazing. Thank you so much for your time and your talent. And like I said, I'm gonna hold you to it and coming back again soon.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for sharing your time and expertise with us. I encourage everyone to connect with Dolores on LinkedIn and follow her to gain access to some amazing insight and details where you may be able to find her in the year ahead, potentially some articles, and definitely read that dissertation and ask questions. If you like what you heard today, we also encourage you to check out our YouTube channel by the same name, where you can find our archives and check out all of our past podcasts. This year ahead, we are committed to continuing to bring you the best thought leaders and experts to assist in making this fiscal year your best yet. As always, we appreciate you being here. I'm Teresa Moon, and this is Spilling the Tea on GovCon. Have a great day.